Okay, so hi and welcome on behalf of the University of Malta Students Futsal team. My name is Nicola Juice and I will be introducing the topic of mental health in athletes and the way in which it affects performance and mindset towards sports. With us we have three panel speakers. First we have Dylan Cacciatolo, UN Futsal captain and goalkeeper. We have Amy McAuliffe, Malta national team swimmer, and Dr. Adele Muscat, sports psychologist for the Malta Football Association and lecturer at the University of Malta. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, Dylan Cacciatolo, nilab ma l-Università ta' Malta u ma tim nazzjonali ta' Malta wkoll.
Hi, I'm Amy McAuliffe. I'm 23 years old. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Sports and Physical Activity, and I'm a Maltese national team swimmer.
Hi, I'm Dr. Adele Muscat. I lecture at the University of Malta Institute for Physical Education and Sport. I'm, as such, primarily qualified as a sports psychologist, and I worked for over 20 years in applied sports psychology work as well.
Okay, thank you. So we can start with the first question. What are the main issues that athletes face when it comes to their mental health?
I guess at the moment, if we had to look at the situation at the moment, I don't think it's an issue that is affecting athletes only, but it's affecting everyone. The issue of how long COVID is taking. For athletes, it's of course more challenging because they identify as athletes. So their identity is somewhat a bit confused at the moment because I cannot train and I cannot compete. So kind of where do I stand at the moment? And this causes anxiety. Uncertainty causes anxiety.
I mean, I think in the past, I probably faced certain issues and I thought that maybe I was stressed out or anxious or the situation was difficult to get through. But I would say that after this year, if things turn out to be better in the future, like in the next few months, then when I would face other challenges, I think that they would probably be nothing compared to what I've been through definitely the last few months. So, but in general, especially in the past, I mean, obviously athletes face difficulties pre-competition. I mean, being confident, so sort of confidence issues or, I mean, there are many different things, you know.
Bażikament naħseb naqbel mal-bqija tal-panel l-iktar issues li konna fil-passat mhuma xejn komparat ma' dawn li għandna bħalissa, il-fatt li ma tkunx taf jekk hux qed titrenja u xwejn titlet titrenja bħalissa ma tafx jekk il-competitions mhumiex ħajkompli jew le. Però in ġenerali naħseb bħala atleta wkoll time management dejjem kien ikun il-problema naħseb il-prinċipali li jkollok kif ħatlaħħaq mal-ħajja personali, mal-ħajja mal-karriera tiegħek professjonali u kif ukoll kif ħatkun kapaċi tipperformja kemm waqt it-training kif ukoll għall-lob. Naħseb naċċel dik l-iktar li huma challenges li dawk dejjem kienu daqsxejn diffiċli biex tissupera u tkompli.
Thank you. Who do they usually turn to support for their help, or who should they turn to?
I can tell you who they should turn to, but it's also different who they turn to, okay? It also depends on the age the athlete is at. Some athletes will turn to coaches, some athletes will turn to each other, some athletes will turn to family members or their partner. However, these cannot always help them because either they don't understand the situation enough or they are not as supportive as much as the athlete would like them to be supportive. Ideally, athletes should turn to people in support systems to help them. So it could be sports psychologists, it could be counselors, depending again on what kind of support is available. But if we had to look at university students in general, university students can look for support at the well-being center. Student athletes at the university can look for support with the student support system within university, where they can also have free services with a sports psychologist. But really and truly, it is a challenge for athletes to seek support. The reason being because the stereotypical image of an athlete is we are strong individuals and we don't need help. So I think a lot of athletes struggle to break down this barrier and seek that support when they need it.
Thank you.
I mean, obviously, like Adele said, there are many people that you can turn to. And obviously, I think that people tend to turn to the people they trust the most, maybe family or their coach. But you have to always keep in mind that some people may be a bit more invested in some ways. Like your coach is obviously maybe looking out for other people, or he has obviously the club situation to deal with. So you need to be a bit careful, because sometimes you open up to someone and, like Adele is saying, maybe they might not be able to help you as much as you would have hoped for the help that you could have gotten. So I think it's quite important to turn to people as well who maybe are sometimes external, because they might not have an opinion, or even sometimes your parents might sort of be a bit too not invested, but they will like sort of really just be very emotional in things. So you have to just try to maybe even speak to past athletes who have been through the same experiences, and try to I think speak to as many people as possible sometimes.
Agreed.
Jena ħafna drabi dejjem kont insib l-iktar faċli li titkellem ma' players li jkunu li jiena player li nilab within a team, ġifieri l-isport huwa jikkonsisti minn team, għalhekk kienet iktar faċli li nkun nirrelata ma' sħabi sabiex insib dak is-support li jkolli bżonn throughout is-sena. Però dis-sena wkoll ġejt introduċut ukoll għal it-team introduċinna wkoll sport psychologists ukoll, u meta tibda tara ħafna drabi tibda tara l-affarijiet minn lenti differenti, u dik il-lenti tista' tgħinek sabiex tkun tista' taffaċċja ċertu challenges li jkollok throughout dis-sena. So naħseb mill-mod kif qed nara issa ħafna drabi aħjar tfittex dik l-għajnuna professjonali sabiex tgħaddi minn ċertu affarijiet li milli taħseb li m'għandek bżonn għajnuna u tkun timxi b'dik il-pride li ma twaslek imkien fl-aħħar mill-aħħar.
No, for sure. Like, even though Adele said we as athletes tend to think we're strong, at the same time you have to open up. You can't take on all the stress in your life alone, and at the end of the day there are people that are willing to help you. So
it's also the case that Dylan was referring to speaking with teammates, but sometimes it's also the case that there is direct competition with us. In football, I find that footballers sometimes don't speak to each other because they pick on each other and they tease each other, and they don't want to show their weakness to their own teammates because it's more of a stereotype kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Is there enough awareness in Malta about mental health in athletes, and what services are there? As in, we mentioned some services, but this question is more based on the awareness.
No, there isn't enough awareness amongst athletes on mental health awareness. And I think it's still growing in the general population. But I don't think everyone knows that they can get services even free of charge if they want to. I mean, even if we look online and if you look at kellimni.com, for example, you can speak to someone anonymously online if you really need support. But again, it's that kind of situation where clubs, associations, most of them are still run on a voluntary basis, and there isn't enough finances to support certain education, whether it's psychology or nutrition or strength and conditioning or whatever it is. No, there is not enough awareness. We are currently, I have a master's student who is currently doing his research study on mental health awareness in football players, mental health awareness and education. So I'm curious to see what the results are going to be once he finishes his studies within the next couple of weeks. But so far, I don't know anything of those results, so we will have to wait a little bit more. We did have, for example, the Malta Football Players Association, who last year made it public with their members and posted it on social media that all those who, because of the pandemic, were struggling with mental health issues, they could make use of a sports psychologist and they would be reimbursed. And so at least there was this push to provide that kind of support. But definitely it was probably one of the only, if not the only, organizations that I saw that really pushed to have this done. At one point, the Olympic Committee also asked for a talk, and we delivered that talk. And again, on this topic, if you will allow me, Nicole, tomorrow the Institute for Physical Education and Sport will be hosting a webinar. And again, if Amy and Dylan are happy to join us, it would be also great to hear your voices, because we do have two student athletes speaking about how they trained during the pandemic. So, you know, it will also be interesting to hear a little bit your point of view as well. Details can be found on the Institute for PE and Sport Facebook page, and one will join with an Eventbrite link. Okay, so we're going to be talking also about mental health issues in athletes during the pandemic, for example.
Okay.
Talk as well.
I mean, I don't think there is enough awareness for sure. And some people take advantage of the situation or just assume that their athletes are fine or that their players have no issues, you know what I mean? Sometimes people tend to just hope for the best kind of thing, but it's never really the right approach. So I don't think that's really there is enough awareness for sure.
Ħafna drabi naħseb kolli bnidem irid ikun jaf li kollu bżonn lajnuna u rrid jaċċetta li għandu bżonn lajnuna. Ġifieri li dik naħseb li hija l-ikbar challenge. Ġifieri jekk dawn jekk ma jkunx hawn biżżejjed awareness, u ma jkunx hemm iktar li tkun iktar faċli sabiex bniedem ikun jista' jfittex lajnuna, naħseb li għadna daqsxejn il-bogħod għax onestament anka jiena personali ftit m'għandix daqshekk knowledge ta' nies li jistgħu u gruppi fejn nista' nsib lajnuna jekk ikolli bżonn. Ġifieri actually rrid li nfittex milli.
Naqbel, ħan nitkellem fismi, naqbel ma' Dylan jiena parti minn basketball team u iktar ikun hemm issues ta' mental health u hekk dejjem between the team or between that person that is like you're comfortable talking to. So I don't think actually I agree with all of it that there's not enough awareness in this.
I mean, it's like everyone talks about how important it is to show up to training on a daily basis, or how important it is to give your 100%, and how important it is to eat healthy or sleep but like people tend to forget about the rest of what
Yeah,
people could be going through.
Exactly.
And many more people are displaying symptoms of anxiety. And in our rushed lifestyle and built up environment and all the challenges that we had over the past year, and of course the mind is exhausted at this point. And what I also like to mention to athletes is that us psychologists, we too need to seek support in our work. So, as part of our warranting process, CPD and supervision hours are important for us, and we do seek support within our own community of psychologists. So if we do it, then why doesn't everyone else do it? You know?
Thank you. Now we'll be moving on to the next topic, time management and mental health. Often athletes have commented on struggling to balance lectures, assignments, studying, and exams while still finding time for training. Dylan and May, can you relate some of your own personal experience with struggling to find balance?
I think I was probably one of the luckier, or at least at university, I felt like I definitely had a lot of help. So my course was obviously at the Institute of Physical Education and Sports as well. So they did understand me. But I mean, it was definitely never easy. I mean, they never I was never at an advantage just because I had to train, you know. It was always up to me to manage my own training schedule with my university schedule and be able to cope with my assignment. But obviously in certain situations, like if I had maybe a competition which would clash with my exams, or if like there was some really important competition or some assignment deadline which I really couldn't miss, I would obviously try to speak to them, and I think on the whole they always understood my situation. But I know that it wasn't always the case, especially if you are in a really big course. I mean, it's not always that easy. But definitely there is a new setup at university where sort of athletes get matched with their, I think, mentors, or I forgot exactly what the system was, but you could, at least if you're in a really big course and you don't have maybe a lecturer who you can talk to, or you're not close enough to speak to, then you could speak to them and they could obviously try to explain the situation. But I mean, obviously it's never really easy. But from my end, I would say that actually when I was finding it the hardest to balance and when I was struggling the most with my dissertation and work and swimming, whatever, I felt like my performance was actually the best. It's not always the case with everyone, but I feel like when you actually have more free time on your hands, and when maybe especially right now there's sort of nothing else going on, it tends to get to me more. So all I can say is if someone's definitely struggling with that, try to find out what works for you, and obviously you have to plan and try to give yourself a bit of time off and some space to relax too. But at the end of the day, you can always ask and people will help. At least that was my experience.
Naħa tiegħi bażikament ħafna drabi kont inkun l-iktar produttiv matul il-lejl, ġifieri kont nispiċċa nagħmel iktar li mqajjem u naħdem l-assignments jew nistudja li jkolli bżonn biex bażikament nipprova nikkompensa l-ħin li nkun naqqast minn meta ma nkunx qed nistudja u nagħmel xi ħaġa relatata mal-iskola nkun it-training. ħafna drabi wkoll meta jkollok il-logħob ma tkun daqsxejn iktar diffiċli biex tikkonċentra. Personalment jiena għalija nitkellem għalija nsibha ħafna iktar diffiċli biex nikkonċentra u nkun qed nagħmel biex inkompli nistudja u nagħmel xi ħaġa relatata ma' xogħol. So nemmen li meta nkun nista' naħdem u nsib daqsxejn ċans kemm fil-weekends, kemm kif semmejt matul il-lejl, nkun nista' ntella dak ix-xogħol biex jisni nibbilanċa kollox. Però diffiċli ħafna, ġifieri jekk ikun hemm ċertu momenti fejn taħseb li tista' tagħmel xi ħaġa minflok tkun qed taħli l-ħin, kemm jista' jkun tipprova tieħu vantaġġ u minn dak il-ftit ħin li jkollok ċans tirrilassa.
Sorry.
Ir-realtà hija li dan nippruvaw naħqu ma' kollox u ma neħdux il-break. Però meta ma neħdux il-break nindunaw li maħniex qegħdin nkunu produttivi. You know, so athletes, it's very important to realize that you cannot study for 8 hours, forget it. Study for 2, go out for half an hour, do a jog, okay, then do another 2 hours, and then have a longer break. But trying to cram too much actually tends to work out negatively sometimes. But of course, I didn't mention working at night. But for athletes, the proper rest is also very, very, very important. So the minimum of 8 hours for an athlete, for example, minimum of 8 hours sleep is crucial. So again, I guess it's being able to manage your time and not leaving things till the end. So, you know, sometimes some are picking up on your work.
Sometimes it is impossible. I mean, I'm sure there were times where I was definitely awake a bit too late. And especially, to be honest, when I was younger, I definitely didn't know that I needed to try and prioritize sort of things a bit better, because I mean, I was training much earlier and before school, whatnot, it was a bit harder to cope. But obviously you have to try, you have to fit it in. And like you're saying, I mean, sleep is very, very important. And the thing is that at the end of the day, even though you might not notice in that moment, at some point there's going to be a build-up, so it will catch up to you eventually. I mean, even if you're staying up late at night and it's working out for that month, maybe in the next few weeks it might end up being obviously more hurtful.
Punt importanti wkoll li importanti li nsemmi is-support tal-familja wkoll. Ġifieri ħafna drab meta tkun għaddej minn dak il-perjodu li tkun verament busy, ġifieri jaf ikollok ħafna wkoll mood swings, ġifieri jekk ikollok nuqqas ta' inqat speċjalment, ħajkollok ħafna mood swings u mood changes. Ġifieri li jkollok is-support tal-familja jinkont laki ħafna li kelli s-support tal-familja, so dik kenetni wkoll biex inkun nista' nkompli miex il-qudiem. Ġifieri nifhem li nies oħra jaf kollok iktar tkun diffiċli kollok iktar anka pereżempju bħala meal preparations, etc. Ġifieri dawk nemmen dejjem.
We mentioned the student athlete support program at university, but how much support is really offered, and should this be done also in secondary and sixth forms?
So when I graduated in 2019, and I think it was the first year that they had started the setup. To be honest, like I said, I was extremely lucky that even though I wasn't at that time linked to a mentor or what they call it at this point, I had basically my lecturers who could help me out anyway. So on the whole, I was lucky. So I can't really comment much on that. But obviously, the idea of it is definitely really important. And I see that there's a need for sure. I mean, at school and even at sixth form, in my case, I think I found it the hardest at school and at sixth form, but it's definitely a setup that needs to be more widespread.
I think over the years things have moved forward. If I'm not mistaken, both higher secondary and junior college have a system where athletes can start their lectures a bit later. I think 9 or 10 a.m. and finish earlier so that they can train. So definitely there is that kind of support system available. Again, like in if not every school, most schools would also have their counselors available if a person wants to have a chat. With the student athlete support, this has grown over the past years. For example, in the past year, we introduced the availabilities of myself as a sports psychologist for the student athletes. And I have had a few student athletes over the past year who have come for a chat. So knowing that that is available has helped some athletes in particular. Regarding how it works, also the different faculties will have the mentor, as Amy said, and the athlete will go to the mentor to speak about any timetable changes, any exam changes, and so on. Obviously, we've got to look at the fact that this is very challenging also for the university to change around, okay? Because if someone's going for the Small Nations Games and the exam needs to happen in a particular week, then for one athlete, all the rest are having to make a sacrifice. That is the reality. But if we advise, athletes advise the faculties, the departments, the institutes early enough, then these challenges can be handled much better. Again, with timetable, it may not always be easy. I remember one particular footballer last year who was a pro footballer. Yes, he did have lectures in his faculty, in his department, that clashed with his training. And sometimes he would have to miss those lectures. So it can become a challenge because of facilities and because of timetabling different lectures. It may not be possible for the university to change certain hours of lecturing to accommodate everyone.
Thank you. We'll be talking now on the next topic, team sports and individual sports. Research points to athletes who participate in a team sport feel less of the depression or anxiety that individual sport athletes experience. This may have to do with the fact that with a team sport, you have other people to rely on and help pick up you after a mistake, while people in individual sports only have themselves. What do you think are the pros and cons of a team or individual sports with regards to support and mental health?
I don't know if Dylan wants to go first, maybe. I mean, mine is.
Jena personalment nemmen li dejjem kont within a team sports, ġveri qabel il-futsal kont nilab il-futbol ukoll, ġveri sal-minors, ġveri dejjem kont f'dak l-ambjent li nsib team warajja. Għandu l-vantaġġi u l-iżvantaġġi ovvjament għax jekk inti tkun għaddej minn patch ħażina dejjem għandek il-xi ħadd ma' min tista' forsi tkun tista' titkellem miegħu, speċjalment jekk it-tim ikun għaddej minn fażi ħażina, ġifieri tista' issib ma' min titkellem u tkun tista' forsi tiġġieled il-problem ma' ħadd ieħor. Però min-naħa l-oħra wkoll għandek l-iżvantaġġ li dawn in-nies li jistgħu jkunu ħbieb qegħdin kompetizzjoni tiegħek ukoll, ġifieri li fl-aħħar mill-aħħar għalkemm qed tiddependu minn xulxin dejjem hemm dak l-element ta' kompetizzjoni. Apparti minn hekk, fid-dressing room ħajkollok karattri differenti, ħajkollok ħafna nies li trid tadatta għal mod kif titkellem, it-ton li trid taġixxi magħhom. Ġifieri hemm ħafna challenges ukoll li jġib miegħu it-team sports. Ġifieri jiena personali nemmen li dejjem għandek iktar vantaġġi mill-iżvantaġġi, ma forsi għax dejjem tlajt within spess ta' sports li consisti minn team.
I mean, obviously, I've never really had that like dressing room experience, but I can understand completely that at the end of the day, even within a team, there are different characters. And like Dylan said, maybe someone sort of approaches competition and he's like super cool with it, and then maybe others will be like, how is this person dealing with it like that when I'm feeling so stressed? So these things maybe can be a negative, but at the end of the day, even though like my sport is an individual sport, at the end of the day we train together on a daily basis, and it's so important to have people who are there to push you through to improve. And especially as I've gotten older, I've realized even more that since some athletes tend to stop sports whilst they're younger, and maybe let's say I would have continued, I find that obviously I might be a bit more stranded because there'll be sort of younger ones around me who, at the end of the day, even though I love being around them and training with them on a daily basis, maybe they might not understand, let's say, the challenges of university or the challenges of work. So obviously you have to try to find people who can help you through it. But I feel like it is definitely more pressure. Like when you said, obviously your performance at the end of the day, maybe there might be someone on your team who could sort of pick up a mistake that you would have made when you're swimming or when you're training, when you have an individual sport. Basically, it's obviously much harder. So once you approach the race, like you're on your own. When you're in the competition, you know, you're on your own. So that's, you have to deal with these situations in different ways, obviously.
Definitely some important points there. Athletes who take part in individual sports, the pressure is on them and solely on them. If they come last, they are going to be seen to come last. So, you know, an athlete feels the pressure to prove himself or herself. In a team, at least most of the time, not all of the time, of course, and of course, the bigger the team, we can hide a little bit more within the team. Of course, we also need to look at personality differences of those who go for individual sports and those who go for team sports, and also how character develops along the way. And my suggestion for parents with younger children, yeah, put them in both a team sport and an individual sport until they can manage that, because team sport can teach them how to get on with others, how to develop certain leadership skills, and how to take decisions with others and so on. And whilst in an individual sport, you get to be more independent and more accountable for your actions, more responsible, and so on. So possibly I would see that those in individual sports are more likely to struggle with anxiety because of the pressures of having to kind of improve the result, and you know, it's me against myself, and if I don't do well enough, then it means I haven't put in enough effort, or I'm not good enough, or whatever. Okay, within a team you can kind of say, you know, I'm not doing this on my own. It also depends on other members, and some other members don't push as much as I do. However, what I want to point out in terms of mental health, rather than team or individual, and this is not based on research, this is based on my observation as a sports psychologist working with athletes, and I'm speaking in particular in the past 3 or 4 years. Females struggle more with anxiety, whilst males, I have found, and the males that I have seen mostly would have been in team sport, struggle more with depressive symptoms. Okay, and we're speaking mostly, in particular, in males in the under 19 category. And again, this is a time between the ages of 16 and 19 is the time when most mental health issues first start making an appearance. And this is a crucial time for both the individual and parents possibly to take note in order to be able to support the individual. And we have to think a little bit about it. Under the age of 16, we are very much protected by parents. Over 16, we push ourselves away from parents, but we haven't yet developed the life experience and the resiliency skills to cope. And again, if we have to take COVID into context, and this is why we're psychologists are particularly concerned about those who are in secondary and post-secondary school, or that age group. Okay, and so anywhere between 11, 12, and 20. And, you know, because young people, when they should be socializing with others, are not. They are now stuck in their room. They're now stuck playing computer games, and those socialization skills aren't being developed. So that's a little bit of an aside from the mental health from athletes in general. So I find that, for example, a lot of young footballers have a huge pressure to perform well, to get selected for national teams, to get selected to play with the senior team. And again, if they have an injury, it's like the end of the world. They so identify with being a footballer, and that is what they want to do for the rest of their life. But the reality is, you can actually make it to be professional. So this is why we need to keep pushing that athletes do not identify simply as being an athlete, because that's when mental health issues may arise. And Amy said a very, very important point earlier, that I have seen quite often that athletes who at some point moved to just being athletes and stopped their education for a year or two, or because they had finished sixth form or they had finished their university degree, they actually performed much less than when they were juggling between studies and sport. And the reason being, they had too much time to think when they were just being athletes. And thinking too much, obviously, then gets in the way of performing. Overthinking can, push us down.
Very interesting, thank you. How does the pressure to win weigh on one's mental health?
I mean, it's never really easy. But I think you have to learn through experiences. Like, there are always going to be good and bad races or good and bad competitions, but you have to learn more about yourself. And like Adele is saying, at the end of the day, really, you need to know that there's more to just this one medal or this one performance, and hopefully learning about yourself a bit more and the way you will approach situations like this can help you tackle that in the best way possible and achieve your best performance.
Personalment naħseb li ħafna drabi ħafna timijiet ġifieri dejjem inti qed tiffoka fuq l-end goal. L-end goal li terbaħ jew is-season jew il-league jew xi tazza partikolari. Il-problema hi li jekk ħadd tiġi dawk il-logħob li jkunu negattivi ma jistgħux jiddependu jiddeterminaw dak il-logħob ta' wara wkoll. Ġifieri ħafna drabi irid ikollok dawk l-individwi li jippuxjaw, issa qed nitkellem within a team sports. Ikollok dawk l-individwi li forsi jaraw karattri li huma daqsxejn iktar dgħajfa, forsi jtuhom dik il-push li jkun hemm iktar bżonn biex forsi anka tara l-perspettiva sieħa, you see the bigger picture rather than that one bad performance.
I think it's a question of athletes needing to try and win against themselves, first of all. So trying to remove the pressure on having to win the game, win the league, win the race by focusing more on performance. If we focus on performance, it may lead to winning. If we're thinking winning, then we're losing focus from performance. Okay, and especially in a team sport, things can go so much all over the place, and the team, your opponents may be far stronger than you. If we go in a league in Europe, it's going to be difficult to win. So what's going to push you to perform better? And for some reason, I remembered one particular episode of when we were at the under-21 national netball championships in Scotland. And we were facing New Zealand. And you can imagine, they were double us in size. And New Zealand were the favorites to win the World Championships. And realistically, we had seen them playing. We knew we didn't stand a chance to win against New Zealand. But the previous matches, New Zealand had beaten the other teams, by over 100 points. So the goal for us was to stick to them like magnets and not let them get to 100 points. And we played the most fantastic game of that tournament. And the girls were fantastic. They really played beautifully. And New Zealand were really frustrated. Although we lost that game and we did win others, but it kind of taught us how to work on our performance rather than thinking about the end result.
I mean, the more I've grown up and more experiences I've been through and ups and downs, like, and people always try, they've always said, like, focus on the things that you can control and not the things that you can't control. But I've only sort of just begun to understand that at the end of the day, really, even if you are performing really well and you're at your best and you just literally on the day can't be better, at the end of the day, there might be people who are better than you or worse. You don't know. They could outperform you, or at the end of the day, you could win, So realistically, there's no point in even thinking about, obviously, yes, you want to work to win, you want to work for that goal, but there's no point in sort of thinking too much about that, and rather at the end of the day just work on what you can do right to make sure that you're pushing yourself towards achieving that, obviously.
L-aħħar meta tara anke atleti kbar, pereżempju, milux rajt il-biografija ta' Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, tgħaddi minn telf, tgħaddi minn perjodu li ħajkunu ħażina żgur. L-aħħar mill-aħħar dawk ifissru li hija learning curve u trid taħdem ħafna iktar off-season jew f'dak is-season stess biex kemm jista' jkun tnaqqas il-gap ma' dawk in-nies li jkunu ma' dak il-tim partikolari li jkun rebaħlek. Ġifieri għalkemm realistikament taf li forsi hemm dak iċ-ċans xorta li titlef u li terġa' titlef, m'hemm xejn li jgħidlek li m'għandekx bżonn taħdem iktar biex anke inti il-performance tiegħek titjieb. Ġifieri hija iktar il-perspettiva u il-blok mentalment li jkollok jekk taħseb li dik it-telfa taf tiddeterminalek il-bqija tal-lig.
Thank you. Now we'll be moving on to the next topic of injuries and mental health. Depending on the severity, an injury could mean an athlete having to take a long time out of training, competing, or participating in their sport. How do you think this could impact a person's mental health? Any experiences to share?
I don't know, Dylan.
Bħalissa għadniet nirkupra minn injury, ġifieri ġitni tagħti laki kont dak li hija off-season ukoll, ġifieri ifhimni l-iktar parti diffiċli minn ta' injury iktar milli l-injury nifisha hija dik il-frustrazzjoni li ma tkunx tista' tagħmel xejn dwarha, ġifieri tista' tagħmel ir-rehab, però ikun hemm ċertu injuries li xorta fl-aħħar mill-aħħar irdu jieħdu l-ħin tagħhom sabiex actually terġa' tiġi għal dik il-performance li tkun imdorri fiha. Ġifieri naħseb l-iktar parti diffiċli hija li taċċetta li jkollok l-injury u li tagħmel ħin wieqaf anke jekk ifisser li sħabek għadhom għaddejjin ġifieri training sessions ġimgħa sħiħa u hekk. U fl-aħħar mill-aħħar meta taċċetta mbagħad trid taħdem fuqek innifsek biex kemm jista' jkun meta jiġi ċans biex terġa' tidħol tkun at your best.
I mean, luckily I've never had any major injuries which have kept me out of my training for periods of time where I would be extremely worried about my performance. I mean, literally probably COVID feels like, I mean, this phase at the moment feels like the biggest injury for me in the terms of obviously the pools being closed or not being able to access your training facilities and even having to face quarantine and everything. So, but I can completely understand how it would be a really, really stressful situation. But like Dylan said, I think the hardest part is accepting in that moment. And to be honest, the quicker you sort of plan for what's next and sort of see what steps you can take to get yourself in the right frame of mind and accept and move forwards, the better it would be. I mean, I recently, I would say, I don't know how many months ago it is now, but obviously I follow swimming mostly. A gold medalist, she swims for Sweden, broke her elbow. And I mean, this was literally running up to competition time now, where they had Olympic trials and everything. And it was a pretty serious injury. And it's impressive how, I mean, even just on her Instagram, you see how positive she is. And obviously it's tough. I mean, I'm sure she's not extremely happy. She would have definitely rather the situation be different. But somebody asked her a question and they told her like something like, will you be winning a gold medal in the Olympics this year? And she didn't sound negative at all. I mean, she at the moment can't even really swim her own stroke. So basically in butterfly, you apply pressure against the water with both your arms. At the moment, she can't apply the same pressure with her broken arm. And so she's not even training her stroke. And all she commented back was something like, at the end of the day, it's going to be harder, but obviously I'm going to try my best. It wasn't even negative. So you just realize how, and she's obviously a professional athlete, you know, how they approach situations and how important it is to try and, like Dylan said, accept and move forwards and find the right steps to keep pushing through it.
When an athlete gets a serious injury and they're out for a couple of months, even a year or two, they pass through what is called the dabda process, the grief process, a process that happens to us when we lose someone close to us. And so when we get injured, we first deny that the injury has happened. Maybe we say it will be over soon, or is this just a strain? And then we get angry. Why is this happening now? And this is the wrong timing, and I was preparing for some big games. Then there's the bargaining phase. Maybe if I don't operate and I work on the muscles around my knee, maybe I can strengthen my leg and I can compete anyway. Or if I do more sessions at the gym, I might get better sooner, and so on. Then there is the depression phase, where the athlete realizes it's going to take the time required. And then there is the acceptance phase. When we accept that the injury has happened, rehab will take a number of months, and it's a process that we have to adapt to. Of course, athletes pass through these phases differently. Some may get stuck in a particular phase, and some may go through it quite smoothly. But a number may need psychological help in getting back on track. This is mainly seen with ACL injuries, anterior cruciate ligament injuries. So players, for example, would have been out for 6 to 9 months. Physically, they may be fine. They may have done all the tests required, ballets and so on. But mentally, they're not yet feeling comfortable to go back onto the pitch because they fear the injury. And in fact, we have had cases. I remember one particular case not so long ago, coming back from a cruciate ligament injury. Within the first minute of his return, they crashed into him and they tore his other cruciate ligament. So, you know, he was out again straight away. Of course, the younger the athlete and the more talented, the more the struggle is. Because again, as I said earlier, there isn't those resiliency skills yet. So you have someone who's just moved to play with the senior team at the age of 16, and suddenly they've got injured. And they really, really struggle with this. But of course, if an athlete is a pro athlete, or if an athlete is going for the Olympic Games or something like that, then of course this can be very traumatic, because it means the athlete's life plan, really and truly, for that moment in time has been disturbed. So definitely some athletes may need support during these injury phases.
Thank you. An athlete's career has an expiration date, and that the older the athlete gets, the harder it is to perform professionally. Does this create a sense of pressure and urgency in an athlete?
I mean, I think it depends on, like what Adele mentioned before, if sort of identifying yourself as only an athlete. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be realistic, and especially in Malta, it's impossible really to just have a professional career as an athlete only. So realistically, I don't think it should add pressure, but it definitely does. I'm sure, when people are getting older, they feel like now their performance isn't going to be as good as it was. But I think it's setting yourself out a plan and just deciding exactly what you want to do and working on the things that you have in the future. You can't just, whilst you're obviously at your peak, you have to focus as well on the other things that are going to help you get through things later on. I mean, something serious might happen and you might not be able to continue your sport, and you will have to all of a sudden transition into your new career. So you have to try to surround yourself and identify with other things, and not only as an athlete.
It reminded me last week during one of my lectures. I had a student athlete who passed this question: should one be a dreamer or realistic? And he made me smile. I said, of course, it's important to be a dreamer. It's important for us to dream of achieving and push ourselves towards the dreams that we have. But it is also in combination with being realistic. And I'm a big believer of timing. Sometimes in life, it's all about the timing. So again, why do injuries happen when they do? And why did COVID mess up my opportunities for the games? But what do we make out of that? Do we kind of stamp our feet and put ourselves down, or do we kind of amend our dreams and see how that can work? And what I also mentioned is that, I was never good enough to be a top athlete, and I could never make it to the big games. But eventually I made it to the Commonwealth, to the Olympic Games as an official, as a sports psychologist. Okay, now of course, for those of you like Amy who are top athletes, the Olympics is kind of their career. So no, as an official, it's just for an athlete like Amy, it's not going to give her the satisfaction that it would as an athlete, really and truly. It happened with me. It gave me that fantastic feeling because I knew I couldn't do it as an athlete. I was far from being able to get to that stage. So, here and there, we kind of have to realize that timing is what it is, and realizing that, look, even if things didn't work out the way I wanted to, but what lessons did I learn? What did I get out of it? And how do I move forward from this? Okay, so, maybe a new opportunity comes out of a particular situation.
Yeah, thank you. No, for sure. I completely agree. I mean, especially, let's say at the moment, for example, if you're not able to train as you usually would or something, it's figuring out what else you can do to keep your mind off things, keep yourself busy, and something that will help you in the future, like to try and make do with the opportunity that you have in the best way possible. And I mean, because you're not going to be training forever, so try to work on the things that you can for the future.
Naħseb il-fatt li għandna il-kultura tagħna wkoll forsi tgħinna ftit iktar għax kif għadna qabel ukoll Għaw Malta hija diffiċli ħafna li jkollok sports li tieħdu fuq bażi professjonali, ġifieri għalkemm hija hawn ħafna individwi li joħduha bħala l-karriera tagħhom, iċ-ċans huwa limitat ħafna meta tikkompara lil nfusna ma' pajjiżi li huma ikbar. So, ġifieri ħafna drabi għalina tkun iktar faċli li naċċettaw il-fatt li din mhix qed tkun il-ħajja tagħna, so to speak, għall-futur. Allura dejjem insi għandna l-option B jisu li jkun pjanat minn qabel. Bekk ħafna drabi l-sports ikollu jieħu daqsxejn il-backseat meta jkollna bejn l-età ta' 16 sa 20 ħafna drabi meta tkun qed tiggradwa jew ssib xogħol fuq bażi full time, ħafna drabi nagħtuh daqsxejn il-qistu l-ġemp l-isport. Għalhekk naħseb li pajjiżi bħal Malta tkun ħarira iktar faċli naċċettaw li din il-bubble li qegħdin fiha forsi hemm il-qoddim ħanispiċċaw, ġifieri jridu naraw xem fil-futur għalina.
And I mean, at the end of the day, I think you have to decide obviously what makes you happy and what you can do moving forwards. If you like Dylan saying, at 16 to 20, you obviously have to try and find the balance, you know, but at the end of the day, like, we don't want to discourage athletes. Like, obviously they need to keep pushing, but it's just figuring out exactly what you want and trying to move forwards with that in mind.
Thank you. Moving on to the last topic of this session, COVID-19 and the impacts on athletes. COVID-19 changed the world as we know it, and this does not exclude athletes and the world of sports. How did you adapt to the restrictions with regards to the sports?
I mean, it's changed so many things, especially even now. I think if someone told me 2021 would have been worse than 2020, I wouldn't have believed them. But in my case, it definitely was. But it's, again, like I'm saying, sort of taking a step back and realizing that obviously there are other important things in your life and trying to surround yourself by your family, by people who can get you through those situations, and approaching what you want to do, what makes you happiest in that moment in the best way possible. So obviously, unfortunately, with the pools closed, then I turned to open water swimming as well, and did obviously more workouts at home and things like this to keep myself busy. But you can never say, you know, so many things changed, competitions were cancelled, everything postponed, and the whole situation made it extremely difficult. And for sure, I can say that it hasn't been easy on my mental health, and I'm sure on everyone's.
Thank you.
Eżatt, fimni, kif għalet Amy, ħafna drabi kollok trid tadatta s-sitwazzjoni li tkun fiha, ġifieri it-tim tiegħi pereżempju morna iktar għall-online sessions, forsi bdejna nintaqgħu fiktar gruppi żgħar, iktar il-qudiem meta l-liġi kienet tippermetti. U forsi taħdem fuq affarijiet iktar ta' stamina u long distance running għalissa sakemm nkunu nistgħu nerġgħu nkunu fil-port. Ġifieri mhix l-ideal, ħafna drabi il-fatt li inti taf li qed titrenja u ma tafx meta ħajspiċċa s-season hija daqsxejn diffiċli. Qatt ma tista' tilħaq il-peak tiegħek, ġifieri dik hija wkoll xi ħaġa li hija kemm xejn frustranti għax isek qed taħdem ma qatt m'inti tara ix-xogħol li qed tagħmel jiġi użat utilizzat fil-logħob, ġifieri hemm ħafna issues li trid tara, però kemm jista' jkun tipprova tagħmel daqsxejn kuraġġ, tipprova taħdem, fl-aħħar mill-aħħar jekk forsi jgħaddi kollox inkunu nistgħu nerġgħu nkunu nistgħu nikkompetu.
And I think the hardest part in this all as well is, to be honest, nobody is really in the same situation, and this is something that I struggle with obviously every day, but at the same time, I mean, in a sense, nobody's really in the same playing field, especially, for example, the fact that other countries opened up sports or put out certain regulations to help athletes and people in better ways than, for example, Malta did with their like blanket on the fact that you have no idea when you can get back to your sports. I think that's hard, you know, and maybe some people can be training whereas you can't. So it's never going to be easy. You have to figure out, like I said, at the end of the day, sort of if you want to give up, if that's what's going to make you happy, then do so. But if you want to keep moving forwards, as well, I feel like it's like if in that moment you cannot train to your best ability, or you feel like obviously your performance isn't up to standard, then you have to accept that that's where you're at. Not everyone's going to be at the same place as you are. But if obviously you want to keep pushing and keep moving forwards, then you have to find what works and give your best in that situation. I mean, that's all we can do. But I mean, I'm sure Adele can say that it's crazy. I can only imagine the impact of all this. So
Yeah, you know, not everyone adapts in the same way. I still remember last year, 2 months into COVID, and one athlete, a young athlete, sent me a message, younger, 18, 19, and not, you know, still in secondary. And told me, don't know what I'm gonna do. I haven't trained for 2 months. I thought COVID was going to leave us. Not even a year later has it left us. But it's interesting how he moved forward from that. He actually changed his sport in the process of COVID. So I have found that younger athletes struggled more to adapt. It was a question of I was doing well, and now this hasn't stopped at all for me. But also, if we don't look just at elite athletes, but if we look at the general exercising population, COVID has had more people to engage in sport and exercise because there's not much else to do. So we see far more people, you know, walking. Personally, on a personal level, I desperately need the gym now because of past injuries, and my body is suffering because I can't do my proper workout. So I can also associate with people who are in similar situations to me and who need gym facilities and food facilities in order to remain strong and able to function in their everyday life. What is also a point I'd like to make was that athletes who were injured told me, well, this year worked well for me. I was out with a cruciate ligament injury for 9 months. My friends had most of their season stopping, so it didn't affect me too much, this particular injury, psychologically, because you know, the season didn't happen, the competitions didn't happen. So again, trying to also take the little positives we can for some athletes as well.
Thank you. Goal setting is important in every sport as it gives the athlete or team direction. How did the pandemic affect motivation and goal setting?
I think you make a plan and then you throw it in the dustbin, and then maybe you pick it up again and then you throw it away again. I mean, obviously it's important to make goals, but yes, I would never have imagined that, for example, someone would have told me, oh, the Olympics is going to be postponed or whatever the situation is. And it's not easy to go through, but for summer you have to sort of pick up and try to set for a new goal. And unfortunately, if you don't achieve that goal, like I said, it's just sitting down with yourself and saying, okay, what do I want? What's going to make me happy? What am I going to work for? What am I going to enjoy working for? And try to take the next step and move on from that, obviously.
li sibt iktar personalment, iktar li sibt li tista' tgħin ukoll li tagħmel isek goals żgħar għalik li jkunu personali li tista' taħdem fuqhom inti waħdek. Ġifieri jekk issa ili sitwazzjoni taf li ma il-goals li tkun għamilt bħala tim taf li ma tistax tilħaqhom fl-aħħar mill-aħħar. So tittaħdem fuq x'tixtieq tejjeb fil-skills tiegħek, forsi x'tista' tagħmel aħjar u taħdem daqsxejn iktar fuq bażi personali rather than l-sports fl-aħħar fejn trid tasal bħala goal f'dak is-season partikolari per se.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, like, this is something that I told myself, and even someone mentioned to me, like, I mean, really, I'm training for myself, you know. I'm not, especially, okay, if you're in a team environment, it's a bit different, but realistically, at the end of the day, if you're not competing as a team right now, you have to try push each other, but you train for yourself because you want the best situation, you want to come out of this in the best way possible. You don't want to, let's say, join your team again and everyone else would have been training and you would have been just sitting at home. So you want to try and make the most of it, but you need to do what you want to do for yourself and push yourself to achieve what you can.
I mean, it was also a time for individuals to work on areas that maybe sometimes they don't have time to work on as much. It was an opportunity to discover that, look, I can work on my fitness more, and this is what I need to be doing, or I can start looking after my nutrition better because I'm at home working from home and I can start learning how to cook better. Or let me try and listen to these webinars and learn more about mental skills, for example. You know, it's about how we adapt and how we choose to move forward. But I have also heard of athletes, of individuals who have stopped their sport during the pandemic because there was no scope in continuing it anymore, they felt.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, hopefully they will be able to pick up something, if not their past sport, and, you know, keep active anyway in the next few months.
Thank you. What were some coping mechanisms that have helped you get through Malta's partial lockdown? Has COVID affected the communication between you and your team and teammates, coaches, and Dr. Muscat with your clients over Zoom?
I have to admit, I have seen very few athletes over the past year. One, because my job status changed, but also because in a way the pandemic brought on a rest for the athletes. Initially, it was a very much needed rest for athletes who are all the time on the go. So it was like, oh, we can have a break finally. Then summer came about and it's always, you know, less busy for athletes. But this past season had too many fits and starts. But obviously, what I can say is even communicating with my students online, it is not the same. Just last Saturday, I went to see two of my students who were doing an administration placement. And it was so good to see their faces, the first years. We were seeing first years for about a month, probably. And I could also see that they were happy to have, you know, a lecturer there in front of them rather than online. It's been tough both for us and for the students, and to make the sessions more interactive and to get them to engage online when we're all zoomed out is pretty tough. So, you know, we're keeping our fingers crossed that you know, the world gets better, because it's not just about Malta, but if big countries like India continue struggling the way they're doing at the moment, then that's going to affect us and the rest of Europe and the rest of the world as well. So, you know, I guess we're at that point where we just have to really hope that the vaccinations continue fast, not just locally, but also overseas, and that they work, and that we can, you know, maybe get back to normal or a better normal than we had before, I believe.
I mean, the whole, like Adele said in the beginning, obviously it was maybe new, sort of something different for everyone, a bit of more free time or whatever. So you tend to turn to things which like I definitely didn't have time to do before, or even just moving to open water training because I had no other option was really nice. But obviously after a year and everything and goals that you would have set and whatnot, it becomes difficult. But like I've really tried to focus on things that I want to do in the future, or helping out with stuff that I need to do at home, and just finding other things to keep me busy for sure.
Stess jiena partikolarment ġifieri il-xogħol kellna wkoll nibdew nadattaw ukoll għal working from home, ġifieri hija xi ħaġa wkoll li trid tadatta liha. Issib ukoll ħin li forsi taħdem fuq affarijiet li vera ma jkollokx ħin għalihom. Essenzjalment dawk huma l-iktar affarijiet li jgħinu sabiex tgħaddi għaddejna minn dak il-perjodu u jisna għaddej issa jisek trid tadatta wkoll għal li hija n-normalità l-ġdida tagħna. So fl-aħħar mill-aħħar trid taċċetta il-fatt kif inhu u tara kif tadatta biex timxi l-qudiem.
Last question. Will this affect performance going back into training and competing and the future of the sport itself?
I mean, for example, in my case, I was slightly unlucky and I ended up being stuck in quarantine for 2 weeks initially and now another 2 weeks. So it's going to be hard for me once I get back into the water. It's especially for swimming, it's completely different sort of environment. So your body has to adapt again to getting that feel of the water. But realistically, at the end of the day, I mean, I've been training for so long, so hopefully my performance won't take too long to maybe be where it was. But it's something that you need to accept, that it's not going to be easy, but it's obviously possible. And I think in the future, I mean, probably eventually after a few months, people will sort of maybe forget or just move on with things, really. But unfortunately, it would, I guess, affect anyways, because like Adele said, there are definitely people who have stopped their sports, you know, so I'm sure that would affect in some way.
Minnaħa tagħna naħseb li ovvjament li ħajaffettwa xi ftit. Ħafna drabi season tal-futsal kif ukoll tal-futbol jinbena jisek qed tibni building blocks għal l-iktar fażi li tkun kruċjali tas-season li tasal għal fażi finali. Bil-format li qegħdin bħalissa iktar u iktar jekk nerġgħu nibdew ħanidħlu wkoll f'dik il-fażi finali mill-ewwel, ġifieri m'għandekx ċans tal-lob li qed tibni l-performance tiegħek, li qed tara li qed titjib f'ċertu aspetti, ġast ħankunu ħanidħlu fil-fażi finali tas-season jekk jerġa' jitkompla l-sports. Li ħatkun ħafna iktar diffiċli milli kieku għajna dejjem bis-season kif kien pjanat. So nemmen li minn dak l-aspett żgur ħajaffettwa anke jekk tara l-logħbi tal-leagues professjonali barra minn Malta, tara li meta l-lob reġa' beda jintlab wara l-lockdown, il-livell ma kienx tajjeb daqskemm kien il-livell meta l-lob kien għaddej brata normali. So naħseb minn dak l-aspett żgur ħajja niġu mill-quta, però trid tara wkoll kemm ħankunu iktar faċli nadattaw issa il-fatt li jekk jerġa' jitkompla season tara kif ħajkun training, tara kif ġifieri hija xi ħaġa li rridu nitgħallmu waqt li qed nesperjenzawha.
No, obviously it was taken sort of everyone took the situation before like too lightly, the fact that you're like certain freedom that you have, the way that training has a routine and everything, and it was obviously much better. So now moving forward, it's definitely going to remain a bit stressful. And I think, like Lynn's saying, I mean, you can't just expect to go back and be where you were before. You have to try and take things slow because injuries are unavoidable sometimes, especially if you just
naħseb il-punt li għamlu Amy u Dylan huwa importanti ħafna fil-każ ta' Dylan li jista' jkun li jerġgħu jidħlu f'daqqa waħda. Ġimgħa l-oħra stess kont nitkellem ma' atleta li tella post li daqqa waħda kellu injury, mela filli mhux qed jitrejna f'daqqa waħda qalulu jrid jikkompeti biex jipprova jikkwalifika għall-event internazzjonali u weġġa għalli x'tistenna meta mit-training ikun b'tali mod u inti tikkompeti f'daqqa waħda. Ġifieri f'każijiet fejn hemm competitions li ħajjitkomplew jew hemm high level events kif jista' jkun li jgħinni wkoll ħajkollha over the next couple of weeks or months, this will be challenging. Għal atleti oħra li forsi ħajjerġgħu jibdew pre-season għax issa ovvjament in the next few weeks jista' jkun li t-timijiet pereżempju jistgħu jibdew. Maybe the challenge won't be so big, però ovvjament rridu naraw ukoll from a sport management perspective, mhux biss mill-kunċett tal-atleta, imma kif ħajkunu l-finanzi tal-clubs, tal-associations. Aħna nafu li mhux biss il-pajjiż imma d-dinja qed issofri finanzjarjament, u ħajkun hemm il-finanzi biex it-timijiet jitrenjaw sew biex imorru għal kompetizzjonijiet internazzjonali biex l-affarijiet jistgħu jerġgħu imorru għal dawk li kienu. So again, in that aspect, it may also be a challenge.
Okay. That's it from my end. I don't know if you want to pass any further concluding remarks.
Mux partikolarment li punt li forsi semmejna aktar kmini li kollha kemm aħna jkollna bżonn ngħinuna l-ewwel hemm and acting too tough sometimes doesn't work. Rridu nindunaw li aħna umani, li aħna jkollna l-ansjetajiet tagħna u li s-support nistgħu nsibuha kullu mkien. Rridu fitxu naqra biex naraw aħna ta' support l-aħjar għalina u fejn nistgħu nsibu dak is-support.
All right, grazie. Thank you, Dr. Adele. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Amy. Atala. Technical issues. I would also like to thank Karin Louise Sona, our social policy officer, who organized and dedicated her time for this event. Thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.